Record.
There he is. And
there you go. There you go. He's recorded from the top just in case.
Yeah.
Oh, no problem.
I'm just going to cover my own face because I can't look at myself. I can't look at myself.
Oh my! Oh.
How you been? How you been, by the way? Good.
Busy, man. Busy. Just trying to. You know, I mean, I had January always screws people up. But then you get slammed all at once, and then now I have like a million different things on the go.
Yeah.
And, now I have to start worrying about writing a book now for someone. Yeah. So that's good.
It's funny about.
How you been, man?
Yeah, good. I know what you mean about January. I'm pretty workaholic, right? So you think, I'm just going to work through the holiday season. But there's something in the psyche that stops you. It just slows you down. I don't know what it is. And it took me about a month. I got came back. I got that again. But it's the subtle version because I've got the antibodies, obviously, right? But still, I got taken out for a week again on that. But there is something about the holiday season that, I don't know, the psyche just knows that other people are taking time off or whatever. So I was definitely slow. But then just all of a sudden in February, that energy just came for me. It was just easy to write again, right? For some reason. Don't know why.
Exactly. But then people want you all at once, and then so you have to plan out your whole week. And
that's right. That's what I'm trying to figure out as well, is when to fit in the dialogues, because it takes you away from your work. And if I do too many of those, and I'm sure you feel the same thing, right? Is you feel like you're not aligned with your destiny, which is to actually articulate something.
100%.
Present, and you're like, I'm being taken away from articulating my own brand of whatever this is, my thought, just to have dialogues with people. But you have to do that. But it's good in a way because you are part of the community. But you got to balance it, or else you'll just feel like you're not aligned with your destiny. That's my view.
Yeah, I mean, it pulls away from your own thing when you go into other people's podcasts. But then you do it because it's always good to have a unique perspective in what people ask you. And
true.
It's it really does build your repertoire. So and then you always have a million things on the go. But before I pressed record, you were saying about discovering a vibe or opening something up, and I'll get to intro, but I wanted to talk.
You don't have to even intro it.
I mean, I'm sure people know who you are. And but maybe not. We'll want to get to
they
that.
They won't know who I am. Well, the GeoCells, like, what's going on, GeoCells?
GeoCells know who you are, but
well, some of them do. Some of them are subscribers, but I'm talking with the GeoSage and with the GeoCells. So it's a pleasing day for Scott.
Exactly. But you were saying like catching a vibe. You were talking to was it Poe the person
Morgoth.
or who was it? Morgoth.
Poe the person after, but she responded to it. Obviously, I could tell by the way she was talking about it. And for me, in the moment, it felt like, yes, I was talking about Morgoth going into the countryside and into the countryside to see a path which was unutilitarian. And of course, that's an order that is not modern, because the modern is, of course, it's the way of being towards creating standing reserve, right?
Exactly.
It's challenging nature to appear in a certain way. We're going Heidegger cell here with all the terminology, but I felt it in the moment, and because I'd watched his videos very carefully, and I felt that, and when we were talking about it, it was very. That's what happens in a dialogue, a dialogos, I suppose, as the fancy people are calling it. It's a mutual opening between people, right? And that's what happened. Is that we were disclosing something about English being, or about how to cut through the inauthentic to get to it, because that's what we're all trying to do. That's what religious practice is. The same thing. The church is like a human. The church is almost like an ontological bubble. Is that you cleanse yourself when you go in. You put your candle, well, in an Orthodox church anyway, and you're entering the sacred space. It's like that, and so people are all looking for practices and ways to do that. So I'm trying to uncover it for myself and for everyone else, right? But you've got your Christian practice, so I'm sure you've always been Christian, right? So you've had access to that from the start.
I've veered into New Ageism for a little bit, but pretty much cradle Catholic. So yeah,
it's funny, right? I find that people are a bit, because I'm a big Jung guy, and I've read him from the early days before I even knew about Peterson. Man, I was
me too. Yeah,
And I agree with you when you talk about, in a way, Peterson over-empiricized him, took some of the religious mystery away from him, because he is empirical in his presentation, but that's not who he really is. He's just doing that for the sake of the scientists is around, and obviously to back up what he's talking about with empirical data to convince people. But what I do find, like people like Jay Dyer, who I like a lot, but they're very critical of Jung. They don't like him at all. Like they say he's Gnostic and such. But that's
you could see that. Yeah.
But that's where he began, though, because he'd read a lot of Gnostic books. But as he talks about with the archetypes, that's just the content that filled in to the archetypes when he was doing his imaginal practices, which you see in the black books, right? And then when he starts moving towards the Christian content, he leaves that behind and fills that in with and goes to the tradition, which is his book, The Answer to Job. And
that's the one that lands him the most criticism from traditional Christians. That Answers to Job, like, really bordering on basically a Gnostic text. A little bit. But go ahead.
A Gnostic take on
Gnostic take on it.
He tries to, in this text, he tries to massage it. People have said this to me. He tries to frame it in a way to not make it get him so much criticism. But what do you think about? What do you think about the Answer to Job text?
Well, it's certainly heretical. Like, let's get that out of the way. So, like, Jonathan Pajou is right. Like, I think we were talking about this many moons ago, when I was back still on BTR. But no, so I think that I get what Jung is talking about. There are parts, like, for example, in the Symbolic Life, which is a compilation of his letter, like not his letters, but his like minor interviews and like minor essays that just didn't fit the bill, and like a lot of the other collected works. And sometimes those things are more interesting than like the main body. So it's funny you mentioned that, because just the other day I was cracking through Symbolic Life, and he talks, and basically he has this like libtarded take about like the nature of religion and how people misunderstand him, and how other people that are more like of a sort of priestly type. I forget the exact context. I could dig it up, but essentially Answers to Job tries in his mind to solve the question of like the problem of evil and privation by saying that, a fully completed God has to integrate within itself a form of evil. And of course, this is going against like the more Augustinian, and he knew this because his father was a Lutheran pastor, but it's going against like basically the Orthodox, like more like Augustinian or Thomish, even like in Orthodoxy, the interpretation of evil being privation, being like away from grace, and therefore being wholly, different from like the sort of Trinitine God, right? So, but I think Jung opens up a very interesting space to think about these questions. Not that I agree, though. I do think Answers to Job is like, from a purely Catholic perspective, sussy Baka take. But I get what he means, because he's saying like, he was very much at the time he wrote Answers to Job was finding a way of Christianity to engage with an ever-changing world. This was like right on the cusp of the 50s and 60s. And I believe Answers to Job was like later on. Because I know like later on he was fascinated by newer forms of religiosity, by the burgeoning New Age movement when he died, and also the UFO thing. So
I mean, and also with he's obviously obsessed with opposites. And not everything has. It's actually quite rare to have something that has a pure opposite, right? It's exactly. And I think that his key thesis, that the idea that God is unconscious until he gets to the Job, that's basically what he's saying, is that the God is like the inner of human is. I get it. He's seen that we're made in the image of God, that our being is unconscious and conscious, and so God is too, and only starts to become conscious with that idea. When I was reading that, I thought, okay, I see where you're going, but
well, a lot of Gnostic texts get that idea, but also like Simone Weil has the idea of like co-created creation, where God, him, or itself is not complete, but rather the sort of as Logos develops, the Lord develops as well. I mean, that's incredibly like that basically turns Christianity on its head the way that like traditional Gnosticism does.
But overvaluates the human, I think, in a way when I think about that,
so.
which Heidegger is great about that, and saying that that's our problem, is that we say that we are being when we are the the annihilation, right? And you do see quite interestingly in the Anglo-Saxon, in the Viking mythos, is that there is an interesting idea. I don't know if this pops up in any other ones, but Odin is seeking the mortal's knowledge. He needs it for some reason. So you can see why Jung perhaps has looked at these other mythoses, and because they are incomplete though. So there's your answer to that. So you can see where he's found it.
Yeah,
you can see where he's found it and thought, okay, this applies to all of them. I don't know. That's the only one I know of. The only reference I know of God seeking something that the mortals have. Heidegger
Christ does that as well, but like that's a different. But go on with Heidegger. I have a point about that with Jung, with Odin, but
No, go. Point.
Oh no, I was going to say that like there was around right before the Petersonian thing, around the early 2000s, in the late 90s, there was like, of course, there was like the revival of the New Age in the 90s, and then Jung sort of got picked up by a lot of like students of students, like Marion Woodman here in Canada, for instance. The book Dancing with Flames, and also like there was like a lot of like New Age like feminists and people like that. So Jung though was actually subject to a number of like proto woke hit pieces by, for example, there was that one book, Jung and the Aryan God, which said that Jung was a Wotanist and that he was essentially taking more of like an Odinic interpretation of Christianity that was aligned with Gnosticism. And so, for example, Odin seeking the knowledge of the people, that was very much like Jung's interpretation in his like later writings in Christianity. And so people were like, well, basically Jung is like the Aryan version of psychoanalysis, because like the certain Austrian painter regime in the mid-century German basically let Jung lecture in the 20s, in the 30s, 20s and 30s there, but rejected certain other psychoanalytic schools because of Freud and Grodek and other people, as you know, where I don't have to say it for YouTube, but that's so there was certain tribe in the Middle East. So Jung was seen as like the quote unquote Aryan alternative. Of course, like there's debate because there's a lot of like hippy dippy people that like defend Jung from that. And there's other people that say that Jung very much was, which I think like if you were to like bracket, because Jung was very critical of the mid-century Germans. He wrote how a certain Austrian painter's handwriting was quite feminine. I guess that was his thing it was like his trolling thing, but
well, he probably realized that I think that he's obviously a very intuitive guy. He realized the way the thing was turning. He starts to work for the OSS as well, I think.
That's point. Right. Yes. So he had a lot of British.
He's smart enough to know that, well, British American, whatever it is. He's smart enough to know which side. I mean, I don't think he's picked a side anyway, but he is trying. What I think with Jung, basically, so I think Pajot talked about this when he talked about John Dee with this chap he had on, is that he's got a good he's trying to help, right? He's not a guy that's trying to be heretical. He's trying to help. He's not a Austrian painter guy, but he is trying to render the truth of these hyper agencies, these things, right? And he's very useful, I think, in that manner, because hyper agencies are now starting to emerge. That is something that's really big right now as Christianity recedes in certain parts of the world, our culture in the world. Hyper agencies emerging, right? So he's very useful in that sense. And that's what do we think he's dealing with when he goes to do his imaginal practices. These are the things that are popping up. His metaphysic considers these archetypes as daemons. Well, not exactly that they are daemons, but the daemons at least interact with them, because the archetypes are behind, because he has Kantian epistemology. So they're not directly touching it, I suppose you could say, but the content fills into them. He was very influenced
by Kant in the sense of like he thought that the noumena was sort of like the realm of the archetypes. Of course, like most Kantians like don't even pay attention to Jung. But go ahead.
Yeah. Well, because they're so propositional, so hyper rational. But I mean, I think the only thing he really retains of Jung is the rationality idea, and also the epistemology. But the archetype behind the content. he believes that's true of the world as well. Is it at its ground? The world is all psyche. It's psyche in and it's psyche out, and underneath manifestation. So there is something traditionalist schools of Guénon in that, even though Guénon criticizes him as well. But yeah, behind manifestation, he's kind of Platonic in that way. He believes those daemons are real. I mean, what do you think about that? About hyper agencies? I mean, these things seem to be manifesting.
We live in the world of hyper. Sorry, I'm thumbing through. This is the essay I was talking about. It's very short. It's called "Why I'm Not a Catholic," but I'll get to that. Because I wanted to. I think like another thing I wanted to talk to you about. I read your recent article, and it plays into this. But also, I like if you want to talk about anything, then that's cool, right? If it's too controversial.
No. I
want to talk about your origins. You were involved in film, so I want to talk about that. I believe I watched one of your films actually. So, The Defector. Was that?
You like it? Yeah.
I loved it. Yeah, like it goes into it. But we'll get into that. But so yeah, I'll read you a bit of this essay. But to answer your question, like I think the reason Jung is so popular, besides Jordan Peterson grifting off of his legacy, like I mean, let's face it,
gatekeepers grifting off his legacy.
But I think like in Jordan Peterson, he does like take the sort of like self-help guru route. But I do think the reason that Jung is so popular is because he intersects with a lot of different avenues that are very salient to a lot of like more millennial and even Zoomer ways of thinking, especially Zoomer, because I feel like he's academic, but he's not in academia. Like no academic touches him anymore. He's new age without being new age. He's perennialist with actually starkly disagree. I believe he wrote a critique of Huxley's book, The Perennial Philosophy. And there years ago, I actually thought of doing a paper where I would analyze Jung's engagement with perennialism, because a lot of perennialists would say that Jung is like this effete observer that's like not really one of us. Like Jungian,
didn't like him.
He didn't like him whatsoever. Writers, like for example, James Joyce, you'd figure James Joyce would be the perfect Jungian subject, but he hated Jung. He's like, you're trying to psychoanalyze me. You're trying to pin me down. Like I have his collected letters. Jung like had this back and forth a little bit with James Joyce, and it was like, he's like, I can't believe this guy hates me, because Jung had a bit of an ego, Jung had a letter, I believe, one letter to Heidegger. They didn't like each other.
Really? Yeah,
Heidegger did not like Jung.
He did. Jung never read him though, because I saw one. No. Jung said a criticism of Heidegger, and he says, "Oh, I heard it read out, and it seems like it's impenetrable." But you understand phenomenologically what he's doing. It's an eidetic reduction. That's what the whole thing is. It's like, and so he never read it. I didn't like that comment by Jung. But sorry, go on. I don't mean to.
He liked Husserl because Husserl was a Kantian. So But no, so what I would say is that apart from like the hip PC, Jung, like, and of course, a lot of people in academia, because Freud was so vivaciously taken up by academia, in critical theory study, in feminist studies, and a lot of different sort of, like surprisingly, despite Freud's like, very like, let's call it woke on the WQ, the woman question. He was taken up by a lot of like feminist critical theorists like Eric Gehry. So Jung had to be, shelved, because Jung was like new age woo, not to be taken seriously. But also the hip piece literature was that Jung was like a fan of the Austrian painter. But I do think if you were to bracket the hip piecey nature of like associating Jung, even though he was very critical, like he wrote a letter to the Austrian landscape painter that was very critical of him. And then Jung had to basically, like, all those lectures in Germany basically stopped after that for obvious reasons. So apart from the hip piecey nature of it, I would say that a charitable reading of that work would be that Jung did tap into a sort of like a spirit that was unique to the European psyche, in a sense, because Jung operated at the crossroads of the Germano-European and the Mediterranean European tradition. And then he went to Africa and he, explored different wisdom traditions. But to answer your question though, the internet really does produce mass agency ergogores like nothing else. I mean, Jung would have a field day with the current internet, right? Like it's the way that it manages to replicate archetypal content, but also to produce new forms of expressing things that are very ancient. Like it's almost something like I read this, and it comes from an academic that's like very much like post-colonial critical theory, like bordering on like anti-white stuff. But to be taken seriously though, Akile Mbembe in his book Necropolitics writes about like the internet and MAGA and all that, but he comes up with a very interesting thesis. He says that the internet in a way is like a return to like animism in the way that we express content and meaning and collective forces. So no longer do we have like print media and then and then television, which is rational and one way. Now through the polyvocality of the internet, we have an arrival to like a semi form of animism. So what do you think about that?
That makes a lot of sense, because there used to be a barrier in terms of there was an entry barrier to how the back and forth. So they were restricted by the limitations of the printing press and such, which had a sort of centralized, weighted downness. Whereas now we move back, actually, in some ways we're greatly separated, but in some ways we do move back to a kind of campfire situation where we're all sharing stories, and there is a back and forth. There is an emergence of a distributed cognition or a hyper agency, right? And so all these people now become relevant. These are Jung, and he is in a tradition of people who have done this sort of thing. So when you look at him, he's psychoanalyzing or whatnot. Obviously, he defends himself against that because he knows he's being attacked by Gwenon, people like that. So he said, I'm putting this to the side. But he is in a tradition of people like Swedenborg and the auto writing and John Dee. So he is participating in this. And you could say that those other people got really ruined by their attempts to talk to angels, to dialogue with that which is above us in a higher order. But he actually seemed to use it in a way. He had learned enough of whatever of these other people. He knew who these people were. He knew John Dee. He knew all of them, man. So he, for some reason, and you can see in his dealings, yes, he did actually take a mistress. So perhaps that's a hyper agent, sort of just similar to what happened with John Dee.
Yeah, he fought with her over Freud. But then he concluded that his perfect, sweet waifu wife that gave him a nice boat, and that she was better off. He was better off with her. And of course, Freud always had frustration with his wife.
I think he did have some essay about what do we call them, the Hebrews, and difference between that and European. I've never read it, but I just
it was a commentary. I believe he was reading some political essays, and it was a commentary about the idea between Athens and Jerusalem, and how like the two civilizations, because a lot of people like this is unfortunate, like a lot of like neo-pagans, they like talk about like Christianity being exclusively a religion of Jerusalem rather than Athens. But people like, for example, the late Pope Benedict wrote, like he like not imported, but he recognized the Athenian city civilization model within Christianity as well. Like a lot of those Greek ethics that were selectively ignored by Nietzsche, for instance. Like this is Jung's frustration with Nietzsche, is that when he writes about Nietzsche, he's like, well, he doesn't realize that Christianity is the embodiment of like those like more like mass-produced Greek values, but Greek values nevertheless.
Well, I thought that in a way, and that maybe that's where Jung has a point in that answer to Job, is that he talks about Sophia. Actually, the Hebrews get that from the Greeks. He claims, and therefore, in a way, because Sophia is the world. It's the world reflected back, and Jesus is of course.
But it's the world, but it's also wisdom as well as the chthonic Mother Earth world. But it's also like for example, Nietzsche, as much as he like was, hated women or whatever, like wisdom, like woman was wisdom to Zarathustra. So.
But in a way, what you're talking about, like Jesus, in a way, is Greek in that way. He spoke Greek. He is God in world, and then that gives. I mean, this is Jung sort of connecting with what Jung's talking about. But I could be heretical in what I'm talking about here. But you can claim, and I've talked to Orthodox Christians about this, saying, and they go, yes, Jesus is Greek. Jesus is But yeah, I mean,
Yeah, I
Jesus is
listened to the
God.
Pat Joe one, actually. I was listening to a bit of it, the Rocket excerpt, but I have to listen to the full.
Yeah, that's pretty good. We could have got more in depth, but we had limited time, and you know what I mean. With him, he's getting quite large now, so I would have liked to go deeper into it. Also, I wanted to go more into nationalistic questions, but I don't want to taint him with my right wingness, and because he just kind of avoids those subjects, right? But I wanted to get him to talk.
Well, we could talk about it, so there you go.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, absolutely,
if it's even
right?
controversial, we could paywall it, but it's
But yeah, dude, perfect laugh you just gave, man. That should be a fucking meme. Like, it's just
it is. Some people have capped it from the break rules. Yeah.
Dude, it's genius. It goes up in tones, like ha ha ha. Great.
Yeah,
that's what I love about you. Is the high energy.
Yeah, man.
You and you.
Click and, yeah.
Oh yeah, this is we've got the same
very high energy.
yeah.
Have you seen the AI deepfakes of Trump? Did you see the one?
Yeah, wow, yeah. Do you mean the visual ones or the voice ones?
The voice ones.
Wow, yeah.
Oh, the one I can't even say on air, but it was like, Epstein's Island was great. Let's not be a bunch of F-slayers now. Everyone loves you. We barbecued this.
Yeah, wow, man. That's so great. I love the one with Peterson.
It was like a work of art because it kept becoming more horrible as it went on.
Yeah, I have seen that, actually. I like the one where it's him
Peterson one.
Yeah. He goes, well, I think you're an F-git. You're an F-git. You're an F-slayer.
You're an F-slayer, yeah.
I don't like these anonymous trolls. You're an F-git. I don't know how to say that on YouTube, that word. But you know what I'm saying?
F-slur is probably the best.
F-slur, right?
Yeah.
The three-word word that is F-slur. But yeah, dude, they're great.
Peterson
also,
though, TND.
Did you see the Peter Hitchens one that Drogba did?
Oh no, I didn't see that one. That I gotta hear that one.
I reposted it for a second, and then he said, "Be careful," because it's Peter Hitchens, and you know how Peter Hitchens was.
Oh, he'll go after you on Twitter.
No, but it's okay. Hitchens realized it was a joke, and the way Drogba framed it was, "I'm a big fan. It's a joke. It's protected under satire." Anyway, the fact is, this talks about. He goes, Hitchens goes. Perhaps I've recovered something from my Trotskyist youth. I formerly told Englishmen that they should flee this country, but now I've recovered this passion, and I feel that the only solution is armed insurrection. Right?
No!
Yeah, right. It's crazy.
Brutal.
For a second I reposted it, and then Drog was like, "Be careful," right? He's right, because they could come to my door saying, it's not satire, and because he's anonymous and I'm not, so I instantly deleted it. It was before anyone had seen it, but. Because it was his clip. I added dramatic music to it that was full on. So I thought, you got to watch this, dude. It's really hectic.
I'll ask you about the Hitchens thing. We'll get to the more political portion. But you were leading up to something about Jung and Heidegger and religiosity and the Greeks. You were leading up to.
I find that the pagans really go after Christianity based on this. Oh, it's Semitic. It's Semitic. Yeah, my answer to that is that it's Greek. Jesus is Greek. Obviously, he's God, but Jesus is Greek. Again, I'm not that theologically advanced, so what I'm saying could be heretical. But Orthodox Christians have said to me they agree with this. So that's my response to that. And of course, it's deeply Platonic in the way that it's the theology is.
Exactly.
And Jesus relates to all the other mythologies in a way. He's the ultimate. He's the ultimate. Of all stories, right? He's all things.
The final sacrificial, the Girardian interpretation of it. But
yeah, that is how that is the line of attack of the pagans, is that make it look like it's which is a completely different religion. It doesn't have the Europeanness at all in it.
No.
But how would you respond to it? That attack is that, this is just sorry, can I say that word? I guess I can.
I like to steer clear of it.
Okay, okay, maybe you can
let's call them the certain nation in the Middle East. Yeah.
The certain. Sorry, man. That might get. Can you cut that bit out? I don't know.
No, don't worry. Yeah, I let Gus go because even if I spend time editing after, because I feel like it'll great with the conversation. So don't worry about it. I'll edit it out.
Okay. Well, hopefully that doesn't. Oh, you will or you won't. So anyway, sorry.
No, I'll edit it out. So don't worry. You can go, man.
You will. Right. So you will edit
to save me time. Yeah.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I won't mention the word again because I bet the algorithm, if you even say that, probably lowers its
yeah, I know
spread.
Keith Woods is the master of alluding to it, for example. But you
Well,
were
I need to
asking
learn.
me.
I need to learn, so I need to watch you more so I can know, because I didn't realize that would get me. But I've had videos where I've mentioned that word.
I think if you just say it like in the abstract, like it wouldn't be that bad. But when you start saying it over and over, the algorithm, especially if you're slotted with different people, then it's.
That's their line. I think they've realized that is a line of attack that they can get converts to.
Yeah.
But what I'm trying to do is I'd like to, on our side, have a dialogue. Let's stop this attack on either side.
I mean, there are people that do better than others. I mean, there's like Mike from Imperial Press, Dave, Biz Archives. Like there's people that are like less. I feel like Imperial Press probably does it the best, but there are people that are pretty big that I'm not going to name that are like sort of cemented in their own like thing. And it's like I'm not like that much of a religious scholar to get in the nitty gritty. I know like Dave Distributist, he like really gets into these arguments on Telegram, especially about the pagans. And my line would just be that there are Semitic elements within Christianity. Obviously, this is obvious, right? But there is something uniquely like Greek and Platonic, and something I would say, not that like Christianity is a universalist religion by definition, but there are elements within it that I feel are uniquely speak to like European and especially Mediterranean peoples and European peoples, that I feel like the manifestations of Christianity, for example, in the global South, they take on different characters than they do in continental Europe and even North America. Like, I feel like as much as people like to lambast Christianity as a strictly universalist religion, the sort of co-characters within, based on the national characters of people, they they graft Christianity onto themselves quite differently. For example, Buddhism is very open with the fact, especially Mahayana Buddhism, is very open with the fact that it has elements of its doctrine that come from these native animistic religions and shamanic practices. For example, in Indochina, well, I know you can't use that term anymore, but like, that region of Asia, like in Vietnam and Cambodia and so forth, they have in various pantheons and in temples, a lot of like their original animistic deities and creations and so forth. So Christianity is not as explicitly that, because there is a universalist heart to Christianity. But I would say that in terms of the character and the way that it is expressed and the way it's worshipped, I mean, Mexican Catholicism is different than Italian Catholicism, and certainly different than Irish Catholicism. I mean, whatever Irish Catholicism, unfortunately, is there to speak of at this point. But, I mean, even North America, like, unfortunately, the big problem that, like, tradcasts have is that in North America, the American church has, like, been infiltrated by a lot of, like, modernist forces and a lot of, like, pro-immigration, like anything like James Martin says on Twitter, like that is explicitly like against doctrine. Like, unfortunately, like in North America, there is that shaky contention between Catholicism and its original Protestant roots of America, and it'll always be there, in my opinion. I feel like as a Catholic myself, you just have to admit that America and even like Anglophone Canada is explicitly founded on Protestant roots. And that's something that you're just going to have to like acknowledge. And like tradcats that like to say like, no, America can be a Catholic nation, integralism, Guadalupe national. Like, no, that's not, that's delusional in my opinion. You have to like pay respect to the fact that like these, now England though, I would say that the UK is different because the English tradition has a solid foundation in Catholicism.
I agree with that.
Before
Enoch Powell talks about the English church actually being a Catholic. It's not Protestant, even though it's universal. It's has a hierarchy. It's not trying to obviously it has some liberal elements that came in, but he makes a very compelling case for it being this is actually a Catholic church, but not Catholic in terms of Mediterranean. There's a pope, but we've got our own pope. It's a like the other split off Catholic churches,
Yeah.
like splitting off the Eastern. But obviously, it's so infected with liberalism now that even with Enoch's defense, I would say naturally, my view would be, I would tell people be Eastern Orthodox personally, because to have a pope that's overseas, that's really anti what England is. It has its own king that's supposed to be a spiritual leader, whereas Orthodoxy allows for, this is what Orthodox people and Orthodox clergy have told me in England, that it allows for this. The king, the bishops have the king before them. They say they acknowledge the king as a spiritual leader, right? So there's no foreign pope that's above the king in that way. That's what they say. So I agree with you. I think authentically in America, and my view is there is an authentic Anglo-Saxon being underneath this stuff too. That is, because the Americans, the Canadians, is what they were is more important than the creed they created. It's the way of being that allowed that. That's the procedural knowledge, it's perspectival knowledge. That's more important. It's who they actually were. To, if you want to be truly American or Canadian, it's the people what they were fundamentally in their being, right? And that's not WASP. That's not WASP either. The WASP is sort of the Protestant on top of the authentic Anglo-Saxon. The authentic Anglo-Saxon you see more in the South, I think, in America, where
it's ironically more... it's exactly 100%. Yeah, they still have that living tradition of like the Germano and Anglo intersections and like everything in between, whether it be Dutch, French, Acadian, right? So,
and then, they've got they've got the intersection of all these, the Appalachians, the borderlanders, right? They're from Northumbria. They are, and these places are still the same. People think, oh, we're this new. The arrogance of the elites don't want to be connected to England, but the people that are the salt of the earth people are. When you look at, they still bake more in the South. I think they fry more in the West Country still right now in Wessex, just like they do in the South in America. They boil more in the Appalachia, just like they still do right now in the borderlands region of England, right? And so that's part of the way of being. So it shows you that it's still there, it's still been retained. So that's just a clue of evidence that says this authentic being underneath the patterns of behavior, the way of being underneath the propositional propaganda that forces people into a certain way, which is bullshit. That's not how they authentically
second
are.
Order America, second way.
Second order, But sorry, anyway, probably digress.
Well, in Scotland, in the hinterlands, they have deep fried Mars bars, so that's there you go. No, but because there's this debate recently, and I do want to read the Catholic essay in the E-Right about like back in like 2015, 16, it was much more, and I was a part of this too. It was much more like the theory saw like embracing like the European New Right, the Nouveau Droit in France. And it was much more like America is done for. And it's like we have to find identity in this greater European thing. But then you have like other people now that have come and have been like, well, no, you shouldn't abandon, even if you are Catholic, even if you are like, the government, like in Canada, for instance, even though if the government and the system itself is like entirely rigged against you and your values, then you really shouldn't abandon the fact that, this is a country I was born in, and this is a country that I know, and this other greater like European, like pan-whitist, whatever thing is not really going to deliver you like any meaningful answers. But then I'm still like in the middle of like the two ways of thinking about it, because I realize like the strengths and limitations of both. Like, I mean, in America, you can make this case because America has like still a hugely strong civic identity impulse that does have an ethnos, I would say, though, does have an origin within a people. But yes, or maybe so, maybe no. But like, for example, the modern state of like the UK, like it is black. Like the Commonwealth in general, be it Australia, here in Canada, it is incredibly blackpilling. So it's like, what are you going to do? Like, is it a unique sort of circumstance we're in, or did we come out of the ashes of a previous crisis? Like, for example, like, people that have analyzed the post-empire state of the UK, of England, like, and you have people like Enoch Powell and people like Oswald Mosley that have come along and, talked about this. And even like on the left, you have like people like Adam Curtis that have talked like in his documentary about post-war England, how the sort of broken, defeated people that were very afraid of their own future. That was the Adam Curtis picture. Of course, the Mark Fisher picture was like opportunity and you could find new meaning elsewhere in the collapse of the empire, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, what do you think as an Englishman yourself? Like, what do you
Well, the thing is, when you really read deep Enoch Powell, when you actually read all his speeches, I've read almost all of them, probably 80% of his speeches, and his books, is that he talks deeply about this American elite post-war having a distinct agenda to attack the crown, to dismantle the crown as one unified thing under the crown. And the crown is so deeply important to English it's the last monarchy, right? But it's the hyper agent, like I mentioned in my essay, and they knew something in there, but they just hated it. It's this progressive sort of thing in this American elites, and this isn't really in the interest of the American people, because they still like the idea of the monarchy. Yet and Enoch talks about this in probably 5 different speeches, the Americans, is that no one asked across the empire for us to dissolve the crown. No one wanted it.
No,
we're doing it because these elites have come after us. And he said, I would agree if they had asked for it, if they wanted it at all. But their inclination was there's something here, there's something grounding, there's something authentic in this being that we're connected. You see it in Australia, you see it across, you see it. I've seen videos, and people are even coming out now, right? And they're posting it on Twitter, all these people realizing, oh, actually, this grounding being that who we are is this English being, and it's connected to this monarchy, right? So these American elites, they in many ways drove the Depression. They refused to be as lenient on the loans as they were to the rest of Europe with the Marshall Plan. So they wanted it dead, right? Yeah. Somehow this elite, the elites were the spirit of where now the crown, but they never had the connection to that deep, authentic history. But in them, they just wanted it destroyed, right? And so
100%.
And so they drove a lot of that. And then this idea of us having an empire, England was never about that. It's not in the teleology like Rome. It's not the same thing. It happened
really, so you wouldn't say that the English like embodied that Faustian spirit that came from Rome, or was it there, but then the empire sort of complicated things?
Well, Rome, it's Virgil, the way Virgil talks about it, they know in their teleology deeply that we are expanding as an empire. That's our destiny to go out and expand. Virgil articulated this from the Augustan period onwards, right?
Oh,
England, 100%. If you ask the person on the street in England, if they, what about the colonies, or the empire, they say, what? This is almost up to Victoria, the Jubilee, right? 1879. If you asked him about empire, he'd say, what do you mean by empire? He'd say, what, you mean New South Wales? You mean Australia and America? Is that what you mean? Right? Yet India, it happened by accident. It was a private contractors that went out there. The East India Company that settled these places. And you see in the letters of Disraeli is that when can we be rid of this Canadian dominion so they can govern themselves, right? So these people,
Canada was founded by Hudson's Bay, pretty much, like the Anglophone. Yeah,
they're free companies. So yes, they have the Faustian spirit, the individuals do, but it wasn't the imperium, a desire to go out there at all from the crown. No. The crown reluctantly takes responsibility for the India, because the India lobby used to say this East India Company's gone too far, and the crown intercedes and brings it into the empire and starts governing it because obviously there's damages. But even the East India Company, they get really bad rap. They weren't bad. They even were saying, oh, we're going to free India. We're going to give this governing back. Then that's the plan, blah, blah, blah. And, this stuff keeps happening. A lot of their intentions are good, but things go wrong, whatever, right? But they're really harshly dealt with. But point is, it's not in the teleology of England to do that. So my point is, and this is
because that was the narrative that was totally different from when the Queen died, which I wanted to ask you about, which is that England is uniquely G-word idol, expansionist imperium that oppressed the rest of the world.
Yeah,
and thank God the Queen's, well, actually, they don't believe in God anymore, but thankfully the Queen is dead. It's a symbol of all the, the Queen that presided over the decline of her own empire is uniquely the symbol of like colonialism and all racism throughout the world. And, we're Irish, they're the Irish is basically the global South now, and I believe a few Irish mutuals unmutualed me because it was like the response to the Queen dying was like so disgusting to me. Like just dancing on her grave, and like I remember some of the more edgier anime racists. I remember my one mutual posted this tweet of a favela. There was this tweet that blew up that had hundreds of thousands of likes that said like all the people in Congo and India and Ireland and like all the places the British were, they're all celebrating this. And my one mutual, he quote tweeted it with a favela picture. He's like, these are the millions.
Wow.
So, but anyways, go ahead. Cut you
off. No, great. That was great. That was a great, funny interjection, right? But coming around on the Enoch point is coming around on the Enoch point. His point is that the teleology, all the procedures that make up our way of being, still work. That made us who we are. Right. They are still great. It's only this false idea that we were this false landmass, and that's receded, right? But that's not the actual teleology. That's not the end. That's not the thing that makes up the context of who we are, and never has been, right? But because we've been propagandized by the Tories from Disraeli onwards, who used it to get elected, to say, oh, we are this empire, but never was, right? Never was in Shakespeare or anything like that, right? So because of that, we suddenly now feel depressed, like we've lost something, and therefore, so the decline. And he also talks about the manufacturing in America. It's that we're not slow with manufacturing. We just made stuff to last, because he did all these studies. And he also talks about the growing economy in Germany and the Philippines. Is that, well, yes, they were destroyed as nations. Of course, they're going to grow faster. So it's all false. He just destroys this myth so well, scathingly destroys this myth of English decline. And he's right. He's 100% right. Yeah. And so, yes, there is a decline, but it's based upon a false myth that the decline, that we've lost this empire. So as soon as you kill that, you go back to the English teleology of this way of being. There were these adventurers, the kind of people that went out to America, that Drake, Francis Drake, and these guys. This you cut away the appendages, and you're left with this parliament and this island and this people. Though I would say that these English peoples are now Australia and the English in Canada, and they are English peoples, right? So they have to be grounded in that place. So even though England is England, really it's Mecca. It's deeply in the spirit. People want to go back, and so ultimately I'd like it, and this probably won't happen. It's like a right of return for proper Canadians or English Canadians, whatever, or to be able to come back.
I think they have something like that. I think that if you're a Canadian citizen, it's much easier to immigrate to Britain than than other places. Australia, especially, there's a lot of Canadians in Australia.
Well, Enoch even talked about this. Is that in many ways, it used to be the case. Enoch even says this: is that Australians were quite frustrated and angry, and maybe he mentioned Canadians as well. Is that they have to wait in line like other Europeans? So easier for a German. It's easier for a German to return to go to England than it is for a Englishman or British person in Australia to return what he calls home. Because a lot of people wrote him and saying this is wrong. This is in the 70s when they dissolved the crown, right?
Right.
So, and it is disgusting, and it wouldn't people for that fact that you can't go and say this is Mecca, this is where the Church of England originally is, Canterbury. You can't go back. You have to just wait in line like every other pleb. You speak this language, the language of our being, the English being. That's the language that's spoken. The history.
No, but that's when if you were Canadian, if you were before the charter, before even Trudeau Senior, if you were Canadian, you had that right. You were considered not on equal footing, but certainly part of that Commonwealth. Same with an Australian, and you could go back to England, the UK, and so I feel like, that's what's so tragic about Canada is that we were the most loyalist, but then Americanism, like liberal Americanism, sort of spread upwards, and now we're sort of cut off at the root of that. So did you watch? I remember watching. You watched every interview, the Firing Line episode with Enoch Powell. With Buckley?
Yeah, Buckley. Yes, I've watched.
Yeah. No, he talked about he's like, because America decided that Britain shouldn't have colonies, and then so this is before like even the American public was like woke to this. Where I truly believe that as much as like most of my audience is in America, there was not by the elites though. I wouldn't say the people.
It's the elites, yes.
The elites, yes. there was, from the 60s, 70s onwards, a systematic attempt to essentially rob Europe, and especially the UK, of its own sovereignty by the American elites.
Yes.
The post-colonial wars were essentially funded by America. Indochina was to take it away from the French and the British. And ironically enough, though, like, I don't know if you want to get into this or not, but ironically enough, the year that the Queen dies, 2022, is the same year that the American elite state, whatever you want to call it, the deep state, the globalists, they basically took the mask off and disenfranchised Europe, especially Germany and the UK, to fight a proxy war with Russia. That now it's come out by Seymour Hersh, the pipeline, basically telling the British that if you don't go, and up until recently with Johnson being there, being the most emphatic supporter. Basically, now Britain has to give up all of its military, according to Johnson, to fight the Russians. So it's
what the hell? Yeah. What the hell? And even a non-English, a globalist non-English prime minister is completely ridiculous. A religion that is not even European. That's just like completely ridiculous, right? Yeah. Even Disraeli had the decency, well, not even decency. His father had converted from Hebrewism to Christianity, right? And so was he, right? So even though he had interest in the religion from the Middle East, even though he had interest in that,
there were people that accused him of divided loyalty. Like, there were people that accused Benjamin Disraeli of divided loyalties, right? But
he probably did have a bit of divided loyalty, to be fair.
He did, but when you look at the history, though, I mean, would you not say that he was the quintessential British figurehead leader?
He had a certain individualism to him, but I don't believe that in this idea of British liberal individualism either. No. We've always been in a hierarchy, right? The king has always been there. It's this bull idea that we're all these. No, even Scruton is a bit wrong about that.
Even Spengler was a bit wrong about that in the Prussian socialism book.
I don't agree with what he talks about. I think there's always been the patriarchal sense of even the Tories would talk about this. It's the father, the state provides the father. He goes, here's a bit of money. The English ideal is, here's a bit of money, off you go, right? Yeah. But here's some support. But it's not the mother. It's not the German socialism, but it's, I'm going to protect you and help you and give you some resources and stuff. You know what I mean? It's that patriarchal state, but still supports. So I don't agree with Spengler, but I think the Germans really want to separate. They really have this desire to say, you're that. It's your fault. Liberalism's your fault. In England, it's always been this deep resistance to liberalism as well. This deep resistance. It's you have the romantics who deeply resist the materialist perspective, the rationalistic perspective, right? Yep. Really powerful. William Blake,
Burne Jones.
Yes, and it's amazing. Some of the strongest in the world. Edmund Burke. These guys, they're all provide some of the greatest resistance to it. So this idea, just because John Locke and these guys, yes, they were bad. They caused problems, but I believe that fundamentally Descartes. It comes from Descartes. The radical subject drives that drive to the individual. But if you go to Heidegger, perhaps that was just always going to happen, as being was always going to go through these epochs.
Yeah, exactly.
As we got separated from being. So whoever it was, the point is, you can't lambast England as this. It was them.
it was the Anglos. The Anglos are the ones. Yeah. They gave us liberalism, but no, liberalism, I mean, really comes out of the European mind, even if it's alien to the European mind and its current manifestation. I mean, we have to be honest about that. I mean, I love talking about English history because, I said this before, like my old man, being a son of an Italian immigrant, but yet having family members that were here for like 100 years or so. My old man, he remembers an older version of like Commonwealth, Dominion Canada, where, and so he's such an Anglophile. Like I was growing up, like watching documentaries on British history and all that, because my old man was such an Anglophile because he remembers a time of like Dominion Canada where there was still that loyalist heart within the like lower Anglophone Canada, where there was still this awareness that you were a part of the Commonwealth. Yeah. And then Trudeau came and just destroyed all of that. But Trudeau Senior, I mean, the stepfather.
Yeah.
The stepfather.
No, I know a bit about Canadian history. I think it's a disgrace. what I would have done, and I would have just either crushed the French language completely, like they did with Louisiana, and remove it. That's what I would have done, and said we're all Anglos now. Or you just give it to them, right? Because
I think that would have been for the best.
The idea of the split of language. No, it's an Anglo-Saxon country, right? You were defeated, you lost. Again, everyone's just so soft now that they, everyone's soft in that period. But yeah, Canada was deeply English. Like even Canadians, Kipling's very last speech before he died was to a group of Canadian students came over, and he said, welcome, feel welcome, but I don't want you to feel as if this England is this place that rules you or is separate from you. It's as much yours as Canada is its. It's your, you are, he's saying that you are English, is that he says, you are deeply welcome, and may your children be welcome too, right? It's deeply moving for anyone who's English and still overseas.
A lot of Canadians made immense sacrifices for the crown. The thing is, all this history is like the way it's taught in school, like even me as like a millennial, like it wasn't taught as like you were a part of this greater thing. It was more of just like the historical factoid of like the War of 1812. And like, like it doesn't, you're not connected. Like even in British, like I talk to Zoomers who are English who like watch my show, and it's a tragedy because I say to them, I'm like, well, if you have like British history, right? Like where do you pick and choose? Like how can you learn this immense wealth of history? Like, no, we learned that it's all like racist and evil, and actually real English identity is the beginning of multiculturalism. That's the real English identity. It's like, it's a tragedy because like my old man always said to me, like the weight and the hundreds of years of British, the crown history, and how like every like battle that was fought and every, I was reading this book once, and of course it's by a critical theorist, that's like, one of these like liberal historians, but it was a good book nevertheless. It was called, I believe, what was it called? The Ghost of Empire, Ghost of Empire. And it really tried to like enumerate what you were saying, which is that when it comes to the empire, it was an empire that was like almost DIY in a sense, right? Because you would go off as a British officer and you had an immense responsibility to a huge population of like different people in Africa and in Asia and elsewhere. And it's like the British crown, they would get like cables from you, like usually from the BBC. And it's like, you get to do whatever you want. Like if you wanted to lead, like, and there were some where like British lower officers ruled tribes like they were gods, like
man who would be king.
Man who would be king. And the British, and so Conrad was of course writing this, and then of course Millis took this and made Apocalypse Now, the screenplay for it, based off of Heart of Darkness, because there was something within that Anglo spirit that was not like, it was almost an empire by accident, just by virtue
100%.
of the English going, and very different than the Spanish, because they would take their wives, their children, and also very different than the Romans, because the Roman Imperium was very much like, we are Rome conquering you, and like you will be subject to Roman 100%. Civil law. But the British, like there was like, the book goes through a bunch of like examples of how like these like British officers were basically making it up on the fly of their pants, and they're in the crowd, and the mainland would be like, the motherland would be like, okay, go and do whatever you want, like it doesn't matter.
You're talking about British going out into I think the Anglo has something really powerful in his being. He's good at governing. He doesn't like to tyrannize, yet he respects authority. It's a weird contradiction, right? Not contradiction, but it's he's good at governing, and you say he falls ass backwards into things. This is true, but there's something in his being, because don't underestimate the development of a 1,000-year history. People will go, oh, the British, they left, they were governing us. You don't get what you got from us, right? These nations in Pacific, you got 1,000 years of the development of being in the English to govern themselves, to find a way to do it in a way that allows for, again, this is not necessarily propositional, but you did get the propositional laws too. You got the long list of common law, but the sense of the way of common law actually it's authentically underneath a moral impulsion. That's what it is.
Yeah.
It's not a structure of law. It's a something in their being, something in just the way of doing, the procedural knowledge, perspectival knowledge that developed over 1,000 years. That's what they had, and that's why they just stumble into it and it works out for some reason, right? Or they're able to do it because that's underneath, and that's passed father to son, imitation. So there's something in there, right? It's not just a blank slate like the liberals. We're not a blank slate.
No.
So there's a developmental period there. And also you mentioned, leading tribes of things. Orwell talks about this when he's in Burma in his great essay, Killing an Elephant. Is that
that one. Yeah.
He's pulled away to, but in a way, what's so interesting about that essay is that he's, all these natives have these expectations of him that he's sort of ruling as this colonial policeman. And he's almost their slave, right? He's pushed into a duty. He doesn't want to shoot this elephant because he doesn't have an elephant rifle, but he does it anyway. He fires this pea shooter he's got because they are expecting him as the leader of whatever he is, the white man there, and he does it. And so he talks about that in the essay, is that it's a mutual thing. So a lot of people went over there and they felt it was their duty. These people were raised in the boarding schools that they went into, and Jay Dyer's critical of these boarding schools, but I wouldn't be too critical of them because there's some great ethic, great even Greek and classical ethics and British and English ethics were done in those schools. You were tribally built up with a sense of duty to go out to these places, right? And there is that recent author that talked about the difference between the Cambridge type that ended up getting converted to leftism. What's the book called? It's The Defense of the British Empire. A recent American did this book. And he talks about...
I think I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
I can't remember what his name is, but he's been on the New Culture Forum and such. But he talks about this guy had a brother. There was the colonial guy that went out and was in boarding school, but didn't go to Cambridge, where obviously a leftist melting pot. And he had this just natural sense of duty and this natural skill. His brother failed and was constantly attacking the British Empire and all this, but he went out there and helped these people develop with a natural sense of duty. Scruton talks about this too, is when they came back, they felt very betrayed because they weren't, supported. They came back with a bunch of tropical diseases to England, and there were no jobs for them, right? Because the empire had been shut down, and the places they left just had a lot of trouble.
Well, even like Arthur Conan Doyle, right? And in Sherlock, there's always like the stories of the returning veteran from India that became homeless and like was, there was sort of like a sense of there was always sort of like a darker heart to England as well, to the British people, and that they had the ability to utilize a sort of there was one Comanche chief that talked about this, about the Anglo has an ability to inflict a biblical level of violence to achieve an end that I feel is often overlooked by the sort of caricature of the British and largely American media being like an effete dandy and like being,
so wrong.
It's like the British, they have an ability to, at certain points, enact an unholy level of violence to achieve a sort of a conquest and end. But even like, I think people are critical of boarding schools because it does seem very like the sort of stereotype of like especially like a British father being very standoffish. Like there's no sentiment there. That boarding school was meant to toughen up the British ruling class and the sort of the future generations of people that would lead the crown into various managerial roles. But what your defense of the boarding school system would be that it does build character. It does sort of build a sense of independence.
I wouldn't defend this stiff upper lip because that is a propositional rendering or a conceptual creation that's inauthentic, that is foisted upon the people. It's not a moral impulsion from within. It's not a part of care, existential. It's not part of actual being. It doesn't come out of procedural. You only see it in the late Victorian stages where it's been invented. I see it as a propositional concept to enforce and remove vitality, and it has, right? The middle class has got infected with it, and naturally the Englishman is actually very like me. He's very vitalistic. But what it really is, it is half true in the sense that it's because of this cosmology, which is connected to your point of going, when the English get going and have an objective, they'll go to the ends of the earth and to the darkness, right? They'll do this dark
100%.
things. This is because of this cosmology pre-Christian, right? That's still in our value hierarchy. Tolkien calls it bleak heroic
There
necessity.
still is a bit of that pagan root to the English as well. That Dane,
100%. Tolkien talks about, but that's still a part of it's just under Christ. It's put under Christ, of course, but it's still in the hierarchy. We all have a unique peoples. We have a hierarchy that slots within, which is our angel, I suppose you could call it, our hyper agency. Anyway, so this bleak heroic necessity, this is because the cosmology was raw martial will was this solution to an end, which was an apocalypse. There was no hope of salvation, and their solution to it was, and this is not a propositional solution, so it ends up just being a moral impulsion, but their way of being towards that was raw martial will for the sake of itself. It's a good in itself, which means that it's not utilitarian. It's not to achieve an end. So when you trigger this thing in the English, right, it clicks in. They're very benevolent, or we are very benevolent. But when you click it into form, like you saw in the war, like in the Boer War, then it's like, it's definitely going, your wives will be killed, and all this. Yeah, if it's for the sake of it ends up being for the sake of itself in a way, but. Yeah, I think it is a good thing in the sense of they're very hard to defeat. But if you put a general, Greek, if you put the Spartans with the same general or whatever versus a group of these sort of people, because ultimately the cosmology means they'll do it for its own sake, whereas you kind of have an ordered hope in you still, or an ordered Olympus was the gods won and they had the order. So the gods were there, right? The gods lose in this one. So no matter how well trained you are, still, ultimately, your highest good is very different to these people, and they'll win out in the end if they have the same general, that is. So it's great to the Spartans were. I'm just saying that if you have this ethic, it's very deadly in an apocalyptic war. But yeah, anyway.
Can the British spirit, that sort of the Anglo-Saxon, can it still experience a rejuvenation, or do you think that sort of ship has sailed and that it's going to be like drill music and stabbings and the BBC forever? I don't know.
Well, no, I think that deeply. Well, it's an abandonment of British. It's about abandonment of this word because it was always a civic label for something for an ethnic or ethnos, or a ethos that is English being, right, which is an English people.
Right.
Even this Anglo-Saxonness goes up very far north into Scotland, right? The Lowlands are all they are Anglo-Saxon, no matter what they say. Yeah. It's the Highlanders that are different, and the Celts the Northern Irish are all that too, even though, and the Irish nationalists don't dislike me. I just went on one of their shows either, because I'm happy with their Celtic nationalism. That's fine.
Yeah.
Like, we're all under attack by this, but there's a deep potential in Englishness, right? Because why else do they attack it so much? They've been doing this since 2008. I talked to Paul Joseph Watson about this. He made a video about this in 2008, like 2002, is that they were having the English flag out was under attack, right? Churchill talked about this, is that they've been attacking Englishness for so long, or trying to not allowed to speak about it. So you've got this group that has a way of being that's being covered up. So you've got a deep potential there that essentially, that's what I talk about in my essay, is you have this distributed cognition amongst all these people that people just notice when something in their existential being was removed, they turn towards it and realized it. That's its function, really, to call to itself. And that there is vitalistic. And so that's why firstly, the first point is, why do they attack it so much? Because it's the majority in the place. Because it's the only force that's a threat to rise up, I suppose you could say. So that's probably why they do it, because they're happy to promote this Celtic-ness in Wales and Scotland, right? Because it's no threat to them, because it's a small thing.
I call it wholesome Chungus nationalism. But they do this because it's not like the real like Irish or Scottish nationalism. It's more of this globalist appropriation of like, why do we hate the British? Oh, so we can bring more migrants and trans people into Ireland. Like that's not real Irish nationalism. No. That's like
I've spoken
I call
to
it wholesome Chungus.
So it's called. I'll use that too. I'll use your terminology. So it's called wholesome Chungus. I'm going to use that. It's great. Fake wholesome Chungus nationalism, right?
Yeah, like Palestine or like the Blue Yellow country. Now it's like any regime approved. Well, actually, the blue yellow, a term that my friends at the War Report podcast came up with, Constantine Martelli and my friend GSP. They call it Gladio nationalism when it comes to the blue yellow country, because it's like Operation Gladio, how they would like take like right wing groups in Europe and they would, you know, make them anti-Soviets. Now it's like, it's sort of like taking right wing groups in Europe and gearing them to hate the enemies of the regime.
Yeah.
So they'll take like Irish nationalists and the white British. They'll take, of course, that's what they mean. Like, you know, Operation Gladio was the CIA operation out of Italy and Britain and other places, right?
Was it? Okay.
So that term Gladio nationalism is amazing.
So what was that, an operation to attack genuine nationalism or something?
Gladio nationalism was created first in Italy and then it spread throughout Europe, where essentially they would take right-wing paramilitary groups, give them training and funding in case there was a Soviet land invasion against continental Europe. So it was essentially American, and they did this through free Masonic lodges that were affiliated with the American security state. So
wow. Well, I think what that seeds into, they probably end up promoting. They go and promote a sort of civicness, right? Which is this fake statism. It's not authentic ethnic or ethos or ethnos, whatever you want to call it.
No, it can't be. Nationalism cannot be.
Yeah, it's just a state. So it ends up just being the elites. And what a betrayal for the Irish. What a disgusting betrayal. And again, I've been on their shows. I didn't even expect they'd like me. They invited me on. I thought, this guy, they know I'm an full on. And I've got Irish followers on that now that are like, oh, I thought this guy was very, like, loves Anglo nationalism or whatever. But actually, he's, you know, very philosophical, very philosophically useful. Because all these genuine ethnic nationalisms are coming together, right? That realizing that they've been under attack. And so we got on very well. And I was saying, of course, I support, if you want to develop a Celtic, that is something. But anyway, point being, it's disgusting what the state's doing. What was the whole point of this revolution island for these elites, just to bring in 1 million immigrants and destroy it? So there's no connection to it. And that was another thing that was driven by the Americans. I even say that it's not the elites turned us against each other in a way, right?
Well, I mean,
Westminster bubble elites, that authenticness, that has a potential, it has a vitality, especially with the Englishness, because they've attacked it for so long. I can tell you from the comments, there's a whole opportunity to have a new hermeneutic to remove all because England has been so modernist for so long and literalist in its interpretation of all our rituals. All of it has a ridiculous interpretation. I'm not sure anyone ever knew what maybe some people do, what the rituals really mean. And so I start unpacking these things from a symbolic perspective, with a hermeneutic that is non-reductive, that is, and it really brings out what it truly means. And people, something in their being recognizes it, that it's authentic. I mean, my theory is that in their procedural knowledge, because they've imitated this father to son, they get a sense of what is truly English, right?
Right.
You in Italianness is the same. So when you align the propositional knowledge, right, by truly understanding the rituals and whatever you're analyzing, a true heroic story, when you align that propositional and then you explain it, you use that to articulate their current being and their ways of behaving, there's a click, because it aligns with the true being, the authentic being that's there, that's in their procedures, that's in their way of being and their perspectival knowledge, and that it's a vitality. So there's some connection there with the Heideggerianness of resolving being, but there's a bit of neuroscience in there too. There's a bit of cognitive science there to say it's not just wooey BS. This is you can see how that would work with aligning a procedural knowledge with a propositional knowledge, so they match, so they are not semblance on the top, on the propositional layer. It's not semblance, it's connected to procedural knowledge. So it's not just Heideggerian, it's actually, I think there's something to this. And I can see it in the comments when I do it. People fire, like, I can't believe that, this, blah, blah, are inspired by it. And that's what I do. It's really rewarding work. But also joining this community has been, so yes, I think there's an answer to your question ages ago. Yes, there's a deep potential in it. And it's a duty anyway, even if it can't be successful in the end. I'd rather go down doing what I'm doing. I'm sure
that really is the British, the Anglo-Celtic spirit is like, I'd rather do something than, but also like, it's funny because in Heidegger, there's sort of like an interplay between, like in his essay about the nature of truth, which is aletheia, which is revealing. When you reveal there's also a capacity of coming home, even though you've discovered it anew. So there's a clearing towards when there's knowledge, there's also a calling that calls you towards revealing.
Yeah.
So it's like there's something in you that calls forth for that clearing, for that revealing.
Yes.
But also it's a coming home in a way. So it's like a double aspect of it, which is very interesting with Heidegger. And I feel like identity and the nature of ethnos is that sort of it's an internal calling, it's a clearing, it's a discovering. That's what aletheia is, it's truth.
Yep.
But also it's calling forth, it's a coming home.
Yes.
It's a dwelling as well. So in Heidegger, there's always that interplay, right? And of course, he was speaking about like the German way of doing things, but also, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you're right. You're exactly right in that, because what happens is he talks about this in his essays, talking about I think it's the Kantian essays, or it's the Kantian essays. I think no, it's a pure reason. It's the Leibniz essays. Yeah. But yeah, what you're talking about is absolutely true, because when you actually get to the aletheia of being, it properly orders the true place of all of the propositional of being, right? That was connected to it originally, right? Because we're constantly pulled away from the original thing, right? So when you hit it, it's like the moment of vision, but it's not like you're just hitting some raw being on its own. It's connected to this long history, which is your ethnos. So it aligns all that stuff, right? So that's you're coming home.
It's like an inner geography as well. It's an inner map. Yeah.
Yes.
It's almost in geographic terms, but it's sort of like a metaphysical geography, if you will. It's something that inside that, of course, like metaphysics is a very complicated term when it comes to Heidegger. I mean, his book of metaphysics and the way he like overturned that tradition, but it is like an inner geography, and then later on, later critical theorists would from Foucault to Deleuze would sort of create a geography of power as well.
Yeah,
that's a different thing entirely. But but I guess I wanted to go to the Jung essay, but before that, your essay you recently wrote has to do with the nature of the king, but also the place of law within that British tradition being something that is not like a codified proposition the way law is under liberalism, but something that is sort of like a logos or a nomos of a civilization that is united by the crown, by the king, and is spread forth through the people. So, and nomos is something that isn't just like codified law, but sort of like Mahat in Egyptian, where the law that instantiates the whole of the civilization. So we get into what's your article about? Like you were ready. It's quite a long one, but
there's also a video that's of that. You could watch that. People prefer that. It's very inspired. You know, it's very
for Zoomers with very short attention spans. And
and I've got it has heaps of images as well, right? So it's got the images of what I talk about.
Oh, there you go. Even perfect.
Sorry, I probably should have linked that to you. You could have watched that instead. But it is.
No, I read it.
But the article is quite very well written as well. The article is well written, so it's very easy. It's an easy read. It's.
This book doesn't even have pictures.
But it's And what was that word again?
Nomos,
nomos, which is sort of
it's Roman law.
But isn't nomos? I thought that was sort of pre-propositional. That's probably more noema. Which noema
is the precognitive.
Precognitive. But anyway, the law. Okay, what do the Bible say? The law is written on those who follow the law. That's written on the heart.
That's of every man.
That's what we're kind of talking about here, which is. You could call them an attractor. A value is something in the unconscious. It's kind of like an archetype, is an assembly of values. And the Scheller and the phenomenologist and also Hartman, I think he was also a phenomenologist. They did the phenomenology of a value hierarchy, right? They deconstructed the eidetic reduction to get a sense of these values. And even they said that the content's very thin that they get of the value. But so that aligns quite well with Jung in terms of values. And Jung talks about values in his critique of Nietzsche's Zarathustra, and that these things are in the unconscious, right? They are, so they're not, it's, when I talk about the common law, like we mentioned earlier, the common law is a way of being, and you could say it's nested in procedural knowing, because a procedure you can't just access with your cognition. You can't, access how you ride a bike with a memory. You can't, right? You only do it, it's in procedural memory. So that quite well aligns with Jung's archetypes. Content fills into them, right? Because you can't just access procedures. So it could be in procedural memory. I don't know necessarily it is, but the phenomenologists have tried to get to this content. But yeah, it's not a proposition. It's certainly not propositional knowledge. So it's underneath that. So my thesis, what I'm talking about, is you've got this way of being that's underneath this. Where Heidegger would say it's in care. It's the value hierarchy is in the unconscious. It's what determines these things. You could even call it a hyper agency that's related to this king, and you can see it when you unpack the symbols. The way of being is there. He's not the king. It's this hyper agent, essentially, that's the king that he's supposed to live up to, which is the ideal, which is this value hierarchy, essentially, that we all possess, right? And we all have the potential to enact, which is the greatest heroes are an embodiment of. They are an expression, an external press of this value hierarchy that is in the psyche, right? So when someone expresses the behavior of that, you're drawn to them. That's what a value is. It's an attractor. You're attracted, you're impelled, but you're also drawn. You're attracted and impelled at the same time, because you could say the value's in world, isn't it, right? Because we're more than just it's in world.
In other words, it's in world, it's in worlding within. So it's like your own individual Dasein, your own being that is engaged in time and the world. It's like the higher values, they're also within the world.
Yeah. So it's a tractor as well.
That's what Heidegger essentially meant by worlding, right? Like it's creating a world unto itself, but even it's engaging with the world, but it's something that, you know, like he has a lot of these like slip of the tongues, like worlding of the world, right? Like it's the world worlds, and that it reveals to you the contents of that world, right? Over time.
I guess a way for people to think about it is that when you say you're looking in the distance, that's actually you going touching. That's what you have, this possession of world.
Yeah.
Even if there's an intersubjective thing, whatever you want to call it, outside of the existential bubble that you are. But when you look at something in the distance, that's you reaching out and touching it. That's welding. That's the bubble that's around you, right? So that's got the value that draws you in it. So it's this interrelation between these two things. But point is,
go ahead. Sorry. The point
I was just going to say, point is, just for simple sake, is that it's in the unconscious. It's something you possess. It's deeply historical, right? So it's connected to these greatest heroes. They're an embodiment of it. At the moment you see it, it's enchanting, their power over you. But that goes once you've been in love once or had a girlfriend or whatever. You got to realize it's overvaluated in you, in your psyche. But that's gone once you sort of conquer the anima. In a way, once you've had it. So be careful not to overvaluate its power. Use whatever you can. Use religion to protect yourself from them, because you get drawn in, right, on, and you whatever egos, whatever it is. You just got to recognize that after you've experienced it, their value is like gone, and then you're Baptist in a way. You're like, roasty. Get away. Or even you see their tricks. You see their tricks, and not even just seeing it, it doesn't have the pull, because you've experienced it. And then it's much easier just to be dedicated to duty, and then you'll take a wife with that, right? And for those who are more heroic, that's okay too. Like you can do it later in life. I mean, for me, it was good to I had like a girlfriend, whatever, early on, and dated and all that. So it was helpful to surmount that, and then so it didn't have the pull over me. But duty is just so much more rewarding. And then you can take a wife a bit later. And usually men can take younger wives. I mean, if they're in good shape and stuff like that, they can do that at a bit of older life as well, right? So
but
don't overvalue the chicks, is what I'm saying. Sorry.
Apparently now that's creepy and terrible, and they're trying to demonize mixed age relationships.
Right.
So which I think is just a war on late bloomer, sensitive young men, in my opinion.
Yes.
But
well, no, artists and people that are poets and heroes.
Yeah, artists.
Those people used to end up with, and they used to have harems like later. You know what I mean? I'm just saying people were very attracted to them once they developed this power, which men have always done that.
Yeah,
they've developed a power. The women have the value earlier on. We have the value later on. So they're just trying to destroy our power and value by doing that, right? Because they're pissed because they wasted their youth. Because the women has the chastity, don't they? And they spend it. If they spend it all, they're gone. Whereas we accrue our destiny and our power, and then we enter society, right?
Yeah.
It's great to be a man in that way, right? Is that you
especially the artists. Like look at Michelle Houellebecq. Like that's marrying a younger wife, and I feel like that's my destiny. Even my good friend Alexander Adams, recently married a younger.
There you go. Yeah, she that young northern girl, right? There you go.
Yeah, Amy. Yeah. What was your experience in the film world? How'd you get into filmmaking originally? Like, what was that like? Yeah. And why did you sort of not give up on it, but like, I don't know, maybe you'll go back to it one day, or
yeah. It's well, I'll get to the point of giving up. I've got about sort of I've got a meeting in 45 minutes. So
no problem. Yeah.
As long as it doesn't so I'll just need 15 minutes. So probably got about half an hour maximum more. It's a sponsor that I've got sort of trying to get for the show. But anyway, So my parents were in the industry. They sort of produce sport.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So I've always worked in the like television industry and that sort of thing. So in that area. So what's on my IMDb is nothing compared to my experience, right? I've done commercials, directed commercials, that sort of thing. It's not on IMDb is just a small or the drama, and I've done more than that in drama as well. So that's where I began, and I did undergraduate in the philosophy of film. That's where I first started making films, nice. That triggered me into. I'd never worked hard or anything in my life. I didn't have to do it. It was just something that naturally came. So I thought I've found some sort of destiny here, right? And I just started doing that, and I had never been possessed by something more. And so as I did it, I recognized I was good at it. But then I was sort of butted up against with drama anyway. Obviously, the work outside of drama was easy, whatever. You're getting paid good money and all that. Drama, I've started butting up against the institutional system. But I was thinking it was meritocracy, right? So I'm constantly fighting this thing and getting turned down and not getting money. Got some state money and state funding for various things. But I'm realizing more and more, this is some bias here because I'm clearly competent. I'm clearly very good and better than the people that are getting picked, right? And accruing more evidence. This is where I'm coming woke on what's going on. And I was always lived in a sort of, conservative areas or whatnot. I wasn't outwardly like a member of the Conservative Party or whatever. But so that's what I did. I made films. And when I got enough cred, when I'd won a Directors Guild Award, I went to United States, right? So I had a lot of connections over there already. I sold a spec script to a company called Bender Spink, right? Which is they did the Hangover. So I had those. I didn't go there until I had that, and now I sort of, when I was over there, I connected with the post Friends of Abe group, which is that sort of Hollywood conservatives. Right, that's the group that Shapiro and stuff are in. This is sort of
that's like the Daily Wire before the Daily Wire films.
That's right. Like, so I know Michael Knowles and such. I'm not like good friends with these guys. I don't like Daily Wire. I think the gatekeeping's bad. I don't want to have to cut it out. That's why I'm saying it. I'll happily say it. Yeah. I think the gatekeeping bad for America, all that sort of stuff. I like Michael though. He's not a bad guy, but he needs to leave that.
But when you got to be under the thumb of little Ben,
little Benny boy and his overseas agenda. Is gross company.
Plus, like they have, what's funny is that for boomers, they replicate the same tropes as major Hollywood films where you have you have a girl boss, but she's like a huntress conservative girl boss. That's like the main character of the Daily Wire films. Yeah,
it's so cringe, right? So they think it's a false and also it's not authentically American. So it might be. It's like what Hollywood used to be. They were always a propaganda machine. We just didn't realize it. They were just more nefarious about it. They were just liberals about it. Yeah,
exactly.
Right? And so it was always moving in that direction. I'm glad. I like the woke because it's woken people up. It's driven them to us online. And so, when I was in Hollywood at that time was the height of the Trump presidency, because I came to America because I thought, at least this place, they don't care. They just want competence and money. They want me to make them money, right? They bought their scripts with whatever that I had earlier. I thought America's the place to go because these people are corrupt and they've the false promises and all that sort of stuff where I was. And so, that's why I went. And then I realized the Trump presidency, your whole career is going to be, and it's not that you couldn't succeed as I've got successes and stuff. I'm proven competent in what I do, right? So it's not that a white guy couldn't do it, but when the Trump presidency came, then you realized, you're going to have to make propaganda your whole life. That's what you're going to do. So you're going to be on your knees. Firstly, like you may be willing to blow Harvey for. I said this last time actually when we were on the podcast.
He takes out the Harv dog, and then you got
for money, right? But like, what you want to make propaganda as well. So yeah, I think a dude that's a white male actually is definitely now is going to face an uphill thing. It's not that you couldn't do it, but you're going to make propaganda. So I just went, I don't want to live a life on my knees. And I was, becoming a traditional anyway. Like I said, I was with that conservative, and that helped actually with the courage to that proved that conservative group, they're sort of these guys are pretty high up too. But they're under the thumb hard, man. All those guys have left California a lot, and they're still my friends. And they're and hello to them if they're watching. Is that they're in like Montana and stuff, and they're gone, man. But yeah, so a lot of those guys are in politics now. They do propaganda for our side of things, basically. Excellent editors and who are directors and various things. There's a lot of talent that's left, which is but anyway, so that drove me to say I just don't want to be a part of this anymore. And I actually invited a lot of people out to Hollywood. I invited Count Dankula. I actually brought Carl out to meet the Friends of A group and such, right? Nice, so and I had some events there. So I know a bunch of people in that sort of scene. So, and then that was me leaving, me saying, I've had enough of this. And then this is where I was developing my project, which was get to the fundamental. I was already interested in getting what's fundamental in our being. What are we really to stop this woke thing, to understand who we are? And I realized it's not just Western, it's more we're peoples, it's an ethnos, it's this Anglo-Saxonness. And I've realized that it's just been under attack and under siege for hundreds of years. And that became my project, is to articulate that. And that was more my destiny, because art itself and filmmaking, at least, was very individualistic for me.
Yeah.
So it felt like almost, and it is a way, right? Some of these poets like Shelley, they're not very grounded in their, like, proud of who they are, or they're sort of generalized. It's sort of art for their sake. And so for me, when I started to do this other more traditional work, it was for the sake of something higher. And that was more powerful. I had more vitality from that. I got great vitality and sense of duty, real destiny, not just an individualistic destiny of making work or the story is so important, right? Like that's what the Hollywood's all like. I just want to make. I always wanted to tell the story. Like no.
Yeah.
But yeah. It's so that, and then I made that decision, and I just okay. I had enough money to slowly, and that's what I'm doing now. I'm just slowly been developing this project, and it's been great. The best thing about this has been connecting with people like you now, because I've been working on this for ages. But when I realized that there's a community of other people doing their duty, finally I thought, that's what I'm missing. I'm not speaking to the other people that are doing this. So that's been so great. It's such a great gift to talk with other people when I've been on my own so long. Even though I was collaborating with people, like I said, I knew Count Dankula and all these other people, and Paul as well. I didn't get. I was going to bring him out too to meet these other people, but it didn't end up eventuating. But so that was great to connect with the online community. Maybe it just wasn't in existence in 2018. I don't know. But for me, I was just focused on this thing. But I just thought it was a hard decision, man, because as soon as you come out as traditional publicly, that career is pretty much gone. You'd think more or less. And so that was a real heroic burden for me, though it probably seems trivial to people watching, saying, oh, no, it's not. Yeah, dude, you've worked for 10 years, whatever, to get to where you are. And then you're in America, and then you're saying, I'm actually going to throw that all away just to, it's really, it was a tough decision, but it was the best decision I've ever made to do it.
But even like your films, I was going to ask you, like, what does the indie film industry look like? I mean, I asked my friend Kino Corner this because it's kind of hard to find some of them, like, apart from interviews that you've done and other things. Like I found The Defector. I watched The Defector. I think that was a great film because it was, the Reds were actually extraterrestrials. Like it was great. I love that because you have a bit of that metaphysical filmmaking. Like I was trying to find your one film, Anima, I believe it was called, and I couldn't find it.
That's on it's on Steam, it's on Amazon, it's on
interesting.
You can watch that. Yeah.
Because indie films, you have to go through like award circuits, right? Like different festivals, and like there's channels like on Plex or on Tubi that'll pick up different things. But I remember like watching your interview that you did to promo, and I believe it was filmed in Australia, Anima. And like right off the bat, it's like so-and-so radio show sponsored by LGBTQ. I'm like, oh, yeah. It's like, oh, so you have to like jump those hoops. even in indie filmmaking, I mean, a lot of those archetypes, you know, a lot of people that run like film schools and art schools, I mean, they're not exactly our friends, quite the opposite.
Yeah.
So,
that whole thing is completely corrupted. That's what I was banging up against. I did sell all those films to SBS, all television networks. I just sold my other one to Japanese. So there's all this proven line of how competent the work is. But the actual film festival circuit is complete. Like that stuff, Sundance Film Festival is all completely corrupted.
Yeah.
And so the leftover,
yeah.
And Canal Plus, which is a European company, bought it as well, right?
Tribeca's another one,
yeah. Well, Tribeca's a film festival, but Canal Plus is a television network, French television.
Oh yeah,
network.
Canal, yeah, that's right, yeah.
Canal, yeah. And they bought the previous film, right? So you've got the leftovers of the commercial that just want the good film. Because I just put white people in my movie. I just put white people. I didn't care. Like with the Defector, I knew that if I put like native or aboriginals or whatever in a movie, that would help. But I wasn't willing to do that. I just wanted to do what I was doing. What was the ground of the being of who we were, which is, what I wasn't doing on purpose. There just were white people in the Prime Minister in Australia at that time. They were all white and they were all men. I had a Sundance selector ask me, "Oh, why are all the people in your film white men?" Well, because that's the time of the history, whatever.
The politics of Australia,
but that will stuff you.
Men. Yeah.
But and that'll stuff you up, right? But other people are willing to just do it, to have a transgender whatever person in their movie to get it selected or whatnot. But I was never willing to do that. I just wanted to make a good movie, and that.
No, I was gonna say I love the vibe of Defector because it was very like Cold War, like Commonwealth Cold War vibe. The mood of it, the reveal at the end was sort of like the Reds are actually aliens. That has like, I mean, as for a 14-minute film, like you have to do a lot with a little. But I liked it. Like I think because I feel like last time we talked, I asked about film, and I don't know, like. Not that you were avoiding it, but it's like, like the film industry. It's like, I feel like we need people that do have a knack for it. Like my buddy Kino Corner has a knack for it,
it's
right?
Just, absolutely. I mean,
because then you get Daily Wire, like neocon bullshit. It's like,
it's just
that,
It's just very expensive. You just have to figure out ways of doing it very cheaply.
The money of filmmaking is very difficult. That's the problem. The money.
That's just completely the expense. And so for me, the thing that comes with the expense though is that craft. Like the thing I did in that movie. That's a $400,000 movie. That's short. It's short, right? It was originally a 2-part thing that was about half an hour, but it's maybe even more. The favors that were done on that, like an Oscar-winning cinematographer, like it was the crew was enormous. It was over 40 people that were on shoot days.
Crap.
Like I've done that on commercials anyway before, but I'm leading that, so it seems like a short film. But no, dude, this is a whole.
Well, commercials you have a bottomless budget because it's a big corporation.
Yeah, that's right. But this was like that though. The whole there's a craft with that expense that you don't get if you're just raw shooting as a filmmaker,
like Dope Made 95 style,
which is fine. That's more documentary editing, right? You still the craft of filmmaking there, but I like the craft of how to do it as a leader, how to do it like Nolan would, and that's just too expensive. It's just so expensive. I mean, if you can find a way of doing that with CG, you can now. I've done a bit of that.
Well, there's for example, there's this Kane Pixel guy. He's only 18 years old that has a deal now to make a Backrooms film with A24. And he does all of this on Blender on YouTube. I recently watched Skinamarink, a Canadian film that was a Canadian experimental horror film that does this like one guy filming his child at home, then using digital editing to like make up for it. But yeah, you're right. Like it's just filmmaking in general, I feel is too limited in the sense of like you need the budget, you need the crew. It's not, it's a mechanical reproduction. It's very much like Benjamin, art of mechanical reproduction. But no,
it helps though.
Go ahead.
But it helps because it hones you. It forces you to, and the film ends up being better because it had sorry, it's just my alarm. It had the restrictions on it force you, and the film ends up so much better because you're also the limitations of it. Even shooting on film is great because you're forced. It forces you to be really, because film directing is amazing. Oh my God, it's an amazing craft. And writing, of course, as well.
And I'm like addicted to like indie films and shorts. Like I love short films. I love indie films. Like I used to watch Moviola before they canned it. Like there's something about the indie film that just it delivers like I mean most even indie films nowadays, like they're getting colonized by Hollywood. But there is something that still gives you like, would you ever go back to filmmaking? You feel that it's just a chapter?
No. I mean,
if Ben Shapiro gave you money right now, would
no,
you?
No, I just say no. I don't want to have anything to do with you. I'm so much in this new space we're in. We're going to build something here, man. Geo, we're going to build something here. We've got raw egg nationalists. Everyone's going to do it. I think it's going to emerge into something where it's an ungate-kept thing where artists are going to do the thing. It's not going to be utopia, but that's where. So I see a future for us of you painting, and we'll do stuff for the movement. It won't be, this is 10 years time. And
exactly.
and I'll come back to it with my skills. Hopefully some of us get together in a kind of company, we'll raise some money together, and then we'll, it'll be and we'll work on some sort of project.
I think Amanda Milius wants to do that with a film company. I think she's thinking of that. So
yeah, I think
you two should hook up. That'd be something,
Yeah, I've exchanged with her I invited her on. She didn't respond. But
she's hard to get. Yeah, she's hard to get.
But everyone else, I've had way bigger people than her that do. But she's given me her phone number before. I invited her to that Count Dankula event in Hollywood back in 2018 when she was a part of the Trump administration. So I just don't have a number anymore because I deleted that previous Facebook. This is how much I stepped off from who I was. I deleted my liberal Facebook, with all the people, the thousands of people, of all the Hollywood's people that I had.
Oh,
I knew.
my God.
I just didn't want. I wanted to delete all of it, all my connections, because I knew they would just come up if they saw something. People would comment on it, whatever. And I thought, and that's how big the step was when I deleted it.
Thank you for listening to the Content Minded podcast, where every Wednesday there are interesting guests, amazing ideas, solo streams, and discussions on a diverse array of topics from art, philosophy, history, and more. The free version will be available both here on YouTube and as a downloadable link on Anchor and Spotify, as well as on Substack. Each week, the full, uncensored, and spicier version will now be available on both Patreon and Substack, where you will have access to the full archive of both Content Minded and of Giant Reviews, where I break down interesting texts every week, including other exciting paywalled articles and good content. Thank you all. Please like, share, and subscribe. God bless. Goodbye. Help keep the content renaissance alive. Too sweet.